at the end of the day, I don't want to competitively bid jobs. So if I want to go down that road, what do I have to do? I cannot offer the same exact services, product, and experience as every other contractor. If I do, then there's nothing to set myself apart from these contractors. So what I like to sell and what I specialize in is quality, smaller jobs, and attention to detail. So that's what I sell. This does not have to be quality driven. Hopefully, you guys had a good week last week, and a good week this week. This week is starting a little bit slow for me. It's pretty nasty out. It got cold all of a sudden. I know up north they're getting some snow, and we're pretty much just getting rain around here. So cold winter rain is not my favorite. It doesn't really bode well for a positive mental attitude for me. It's just gray skies and bitter and raw. So I'm trying to jumpstart my week. I'm starting a new job tomorrow, another basement renovation for a return customer. So hopefully getting out of the house and getting onto that and starting that new job will kind of lift my spirits, because the weather certainly had to make a cup of coffee because I was freezing even inside my house, and just some pour over coffee. I, I I know Nick and I spoke about this before, but I really want to get hooked up with a coffee sponsor, and try a bunch of their different coffees. I love coffee. I drink a ton of coffee. We talk a lot about coffee, but I make a lot of coffee at home. I drink multiple cups a day. It is pretty much one of my only vices. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke. I might be better off if I do, but I don't. So I drink a fair amount of coffee, and it's nothing fancy at home. It's just a pour over. We used to do like an old school percolator for a while. We were a percolator family, but I like the pour over better. But it takes a little bit of time. It's nice, but I got to find some new coffee, maybe a new coffee maker, and up my coffee game. So if you have any ideas about coffee, companies, types of coffee, what you like, reach out to me, let me know, and I will indulge and maybe leave a review on the podcast about what I think about the coffee. I don't think I have that sophisticated of a palate, but I know when I drink good coffee, maybe I just can't tell you what exactly undertones I'm sensing and everything else. But here's to some good coffee. This week's blog post and next week's blog post are going to be on my business and my pre-construction process. A couple of people reached out and have reached out and asking me about that, being that I'm a smaller company and what my pre-construction process looks like, because they feel as though being a smaller company, they're not afforded some of the luxuries of a larger company, meaning they don't have an estimating team on staff. They don't have people running out and looking at work, meeting with customers, and then bidding those jobs and doing the paperwork and everything else. So I had that same mindset for a while. And maybe 5 or so years ago, maybe a little longer, probably right around when Selby was born. So 8, 9 years ago, I switched gears a little bit, and I started vetting my customers a little more heavily. And I'm currently now, I've gotten away from competitively bidding, and I've adopted a lot of the practices of a larger scale construction company. So I'm going to kind of explain how I came to that, what my systems looked like, what my growth process was like. And then next week, I'm hoping to dig into more specifically what I'm doing, what my systems look like, um, and what more of my pre-construction process looks like. And that'll be the nitty gritty. And if you're more data driven and less abstract and want concrete facts and evidence and information, next week will be for you. This week is more, the preface to that, and why I decided to go down this path. But excuse me, as a small construction company over the past 14 years. I've worked alone. I've worked with one helper, two helpers, part-time, full-time, but generally small scale company. Definitely small scale. Pretty typical of most contractors in our country. But we need to be working to make money. It's very rare that you can have a small company that you have an ability to make money if you don't have your tool belt on, or if you're not out meeting with customers, or you're not physically working. That's just matter of fact. When you have a larger company and you have a crew or multiple crews, you are making a percentage off of what they are doing, and you have your overhead and your profit and everything else, and that's how you make money. You're doing a larger volume and you're making a lower profit margin. When you're a smaller company, you have lower expenses, your overhead should be less, and you should have a higher profit margin, but you're going to have less volume in sales. And obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but this is kind of what I've seen and what makes the most amount of sense within the residential building sector. I don't have a crew. I've never had a large crew to make money for me. So I have to make money through efficiencies in my process, through really maximizing my time, and um, not not being wasteful of the time that I have. Because if you look at the amount of time you have in a year and the what you could potentially spend working and what you can make per hour, it's pretty easy to extrapolate that and see what your potential earnings are in a year when you're small. All of your numbers are very transparent when you're a small company. That's another benefit to that. So you should understand your numbers. But early on in my career, I would do what most people do. I would work 8, 10, 12-hour days, and then I would go on meetings with potential clients. I would look at their jobs, meet with them, talk to them about the work that they wanted done. And this was all after work. This typically wasn't during the day, because during the day, I needed to have my tool belt on for 8 to 12 hours a day to make my earnings. So I was doing this stuff at nights and on weekends. I didn't really have any sort of systems in place for vetting my customers. So every phone call and every email and every website lead that came in, I was generally going to their house and looking at the work and meeting with them, engaging with them at that point. I bent over backwards for potential leads. I felt as though every lead was an opportunity to create a lifelong customer, and I didn't want to let anything slip through the cracks. And I got pretty burnt out from that very quickly. Unless you have well, actually, no, not unless it burnt me out entirely, because although I was not expensive at that point, I certainly was not the least expensive. And when people are going around and they're looking to get multiple prices and they don't know who you are or what you do, a lot of times they're looking for a price, whether you're low, middle, maybe some people are picking high, but they're not necessarily hiring you for anything other than numbers. And I believe that that's the status quo of our industry, right? Is to give free estimates, to go spend your time doing that, and to meet with people and provide a service that you're not guaranteed to be getting that job. That's just the way that it is. That's the way that it's been forever. And that's not everyone in our industry, but the bulk of contractors in America, that's just the standard. That's how I came into this industry. And that's okay if you're a larger company and you have systems and overhead in place to account for that, and you're charging for that, and you're doing a higher volume. You have people in place to kind of go on these jobs, meet with these customers, price these jobs out. You're doing enough work that you can pump these numbers out really quickly. That's one thing. But as a smaller contractor with less overhead and less people on staff, again, this is either going to cut into your time on the job, where you're making less money, or you're doing it after work. And it got to a point after having kids and having enough work on my plate and realizing who I was, what I offered, and what customer I wanted to work for, that I was just not willing to do this anymore. And I think that even if the rest of the industry is, I'm not willing to do it. So what really sparked my interest in this was years ago. I read an article, and I believe it was in JLC magazine, and it was a contractor who, the headline, the topic of the article was something along the lines of how to charge for estimates. And I saw this, and immediately it caught my interest. And I read the article, and in short, kind of to summarize this and give you the cliff notes on this contractor would engage the customers and provide them with a loose budget. And if they were okay with the loose budget, he would proceed with a pre-construction agreement that would build this job out, help design this job, price everything in this job down to the last screw. But he was charging for this. So he figured out how much time it would take, what it would cost. If the customers ended up hiring him for this job, that money served as a retainer for the job. It went towards the contract of the job. And if he didn't, he owned that money ended up being his. It was compensation for his time and energy and network that he tapped into to create this budget in this pre-construction agreement. If you did not choose to go with this customer, you paid for that service, you paid for that pre-construction agreement, so that all of that information and that binder was yours to keep. You could then go and take that and price this job out with as many contractors as you wanted because you paid for that and you own that. One big thing that this gentleman stressed here was that this was not a la carte. He would provide you with a cost for the entire job, and he didn't want to break out line item budgeting because he didn't want people to pick and choose what they could add to the job and what they could kind of pull out of the job. And that was something that I did for a long time. I would not provide people line item budgeting. This was what I thought was the right path. I'm going to give you a lump sum bid. I'm going to create this budgeting. I'm going to get paid for my time, and the cost is the cost, and this is for the job, and we're not going to pick and choose. A lot of the principles I took from this article, they work right away once I established my systems and enough confidence to sell this. But one thing that I found that didn't really work was not developing line item budgeting. And we'll get into that more in the next podcast. But for me, line item budgeting ensures, one, that I didn't forget anything in this budget. Two, it shows full transparency with the customers. Three, it's not serving as a menu that they can choose what they want and leave out or omit what they don't want. And four, it serves as a leg to stand on when somebody says, hey, your plumber is high, this number's more expensive than we thought, or I just went through this today, some of the line item budgets are 2 times as much as what we initially budgeted in the napkin budget. And then I can look at these numbers and say, okay, here's the scope initially, here's the new costing, and this is why it's more, or this is why my plumber's more than other plumbers. So it actually gives me an opportunity to explain what we do, who we are, and why my plumber has the cost associated with his services. So my small business model affords me the luxury of doing this and kind of developing this loose napkin budgeting, ballpark numbers, I like to call them, and then charging for a pre-construction contract. I've switched things up. I've changed things. We'll get into the specifics of that in the next blog and podcast recording. But for me, I've created a system that works for my small scale niche remodeling company. And I bring value to my customers, designers, clients this way through this system. And I like to budget a certain amount of time for this that I'm going to get paid. This isn't a one size fits all system. There's things you can take from it, there's things that you can leave from it, but I want everyone to know that you can more than likely implement this type of system into your business and integrate this if it's what you want. If your business and part of your sales pitch is an ability to price jobs out, and you can turn these numbers around quickly, and you can get to every potential lead and that's what you sell, then that's amazing. That's just not what I can do, being the size and the scale of my company. So I don't offer that, and that wouldn't be a stronghold for me. That's one of my weaknesses, my inability to kind of manage all those things in the air while working on the job. So that's just nothing that I would ever pitch as something I could sell. Essentially, what I had to do, being that I didn't want to run around and price a bunch of different jobs out with potential customers, is I had to figure, if this is the path that I want to go and I want to be able to charge and get paid for my time. Basically, at the end of the day, I don't want to competitively bid jobs. So if I want to go down that road, what do I have to do to get there? I cannot offer the same exact services, product, and experience as every other contractor that's out there. If I do, then there's nothing to set myself apart from these contractors. So I had to offer, a product, a service, an experience that was different than them. And maybe, and this, I want to ensure that everyone knows this does not have to be quality driven. What I like to sell and what I specialize in is quality, smaller jobs, and attention to detail. So that's what I sell. If you have an ability to turn around a job very quickly, your availability is open, and you have enough of a team on board that you can turn a job around quickly, and maybe it's not the highest quality, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to ensure that that's the customer base that you're looking to sell jobs to, and that those are the customers you're engaging, and you understand that that's your business. I should not be selling a job to somebody who wants a turnaround in 2 months or wants it done quickly, right? That's your customer base if that's what you're doing. My customer base is somebody who's willing to wait, who's willing to be patient, who wants me to do the work, who wants the work done in a specific manner, and wants the experience of a TRG job. And it took me a really long time to understand that. It took me a really long time to tell customers, no, that's not what we offer, and maybe everyone does offer these services and will come out and bid your job, but that's just not me. So what I had to do was I had to implement implement a system that began questioning who this lead was, where this lead's coming from, and screening slash vetting my customers from the point of contact immediately. Because the more that I engage a customer and the more time I spend engaging a potential lead, the less money that I'm making. If I get 100 leads and I engage every one of those leads for 15 minutes, then that's 15 minutes times 100 customers, right? That eats up a lot of my time. If I'm able to engage with 50 of them for 15 minutes and the other 50 I was able to rule out as potential leads within 2 minutes, that's less time. If I know that I need to land 5% of my jobs and you need to figure out what percentage of jobs and leads you need to land, I might be able to spend 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes on 5 of those customers. It's a lot less time. And now I have a more quality lead that I want to say chasing, because that's the word that's coming to my head, but I still don't want to be chasing leads. So I have a higher quality lead. I've screened my customers, and maybe I turned some customers away that potentially would have hired me, but I kind of have to play to the numbers here. I'm not willing to engage with 100% of the leads that come across my plate. I have to find a way to whittle that number down and find the best probability of a customer who kind of fits my description of what an idealistic customer and an idealistic job for me is, that's going to be the most profitable and the most enjoyable for me. Because at the end of the day, I need to make money and I want to enjoy my life. And that's not being an asshole. That's not being rude. That's not saying that there's certain job, that I'm above doing certain jobs, but I want to be doing jobs that I want to be doing, and that's really important to me, and I want to be happy doing them. So that's a lot of the reason for developing these systems and screening these customers up front. So I'm going to get into specific ways that I vet customers, and you could do this through email, you could do this on a phone call. I have a form through my website that kind of vets customers and asks them questions that allows me the ability to, within a few minutes or a few questions, screen a customer as far as how they responded to the survey or how they responded to these questions to yes, this is a fit, no, this is not a fit, so that I can spend my limited amount of time on the most qualified leads for me. So this vetting begins at point of contact. Again, this could be email, text message, phone call, website, Google, whatever that may be. But the point of this is to find the highest probable customer that or lead that is going to be a customer for me. So one major question that I ask is if my customers have a design in place. I ask that for a couple of reasons. One, um, typically customers don't have a design in place at the point of inquiry. And for me, it's a bit of a red flag because I think how serious are they with this renovation? There are many things that you can do to get a renovation started, and I don't know if finding a contractor is the first step. You need to do your homework. You need to start figuring out what type of design you want. Possibly you should hire an architect, an interior designer, or find a contractor who is design build. So even on smaller jobs, if this person says, no, I don't have a contractor in place, we're looking to go the design build route, that's a door open for me. So that's, check, you're still in the running. If somebody does not have a design in place, potentially they're looking to bid this job out and it's all based on a verbal scope of work. One, I don't want to be bidding work. Two, if I were bidding work, it would not be via a verbal scope of work because what I do and what other people do, not better or worse, but they're different. So if there's a verbal scope of work, what I want to be doing and what somebody else wants to be doing are two completely different things. Even if there is a design in place, and this is why I don't want to be competitively bidding jobs, but even if there is a design in place, what I want to be doing and the details that I want to integrate are not the same on paper as they are in the real world. And this is why I don't want to bid projects because I don't feel that it's apples to apples. And that's not saying that people don't do better work than me or worse work than me. It's just not the same. So if I want to be bidding, I would want everything to be the same. And I don't want to be the same as everyone else. I want to be doing something that's different, hence me not wanting to bid projects. Are you realizing that there's a bit of a pattern here? Again, this is not ego. This is not arrogance. This is just, I'm very limited with my time and I can only do a handful of jobs a year. So I want to be working for people who want to be working with me. So now I have a way to either rule them out or kind of keep them in based on if they have a design in place. If I am a contractor who offers the design service, this is a foot in the door for me because now you can pitch to them, hey, this is what we offer. This is why we offer it. We work with designers, we work with architects. And if it's a simple enough project, we can handle that ourselves to get through the permitting process that you don't need to hire anyone else. So you have a bunch of hoops here that are either going to put people in the, hey, let's move on category or the, no, you know what, it's just not a good fit at this point. Another question that I ask, and this isn't a hard question. A lot of times people like hard as in I'm not going to demand an answer from this, but I like to ask people if they have considered a budget. One reason that I ask is to see how trustworthy this person is. If they are engaging my services and they understand who I am and what my business stands for, I want them to feel comfortable disclosing a budget to me. Whether it's a realistic budget or not, I want them to be open and honest and be able to have that conversation with me. If they do not trust me enough to have that conversation, and I understand you have to establish trust, you have to gain trust, But at this point, if they're not willing to have that conversation with me, that's a big proponent of how I or component of how I work is working around an established budget and building a job and a project based on that budget. And that's not to say that I always come in on budget, but at least it qualifies them as far as where our jobs start. If somebody comes to me and say that they want a $20,000 bathroom remodel, 10 years ago, I was able to do that. I was willing to do that. I had a different lifestyle, a different set of skills, a different overhead, and was performing at a different level that I am now, that I can't perform a bathroom. I can't complete a project at that price point. And again, that's not to say that that's an inexpensive bathroom. I wouldn't want to spend $20,000 on a bathroom for myself, but I'm at least qualifying my customer because I know where I make money, and I know that I don't enjoy myself and I don't make money on a $20,000 bathroom. So I'm ruling them out. Um, this this budget question also opens the door to you being able to educate them. Say I don't know what this is going to cost. Now you can be the guy who steps up and holds their hand and walks them through this and explains to them, hey, we are typically coming in the middle of the range for these type of projects. Hey, generally we're more expensive than other contractors here. This is why. If this is the budget for everyone else, we're typically 15% higher than that. So it allows you to classify yourself as a contractor. Possibly they say, hey, you know what? We're not looking for top tier. They walk away. You just saved yourself a ton of time. Or maybe they're like, hey, this guy took 10 minutes to explain to us what the budgeting looks like, why our numbers were unrealistic, what makes up this budget. So now you've gained their respect, you've gained their trust, and they're willing to disclose a number to you that may or may not fit what you're able to do. Again, this is just, are they a customer? Are they not a customer of mine? This is more so than just asking, can they afford this renovation? It's qualifying them as to what they want and what the type of work that you do. Another huge one for me, being that I'm a small contractor and I don't need a ton of work to keep me very busy, is I ask what somebody's timeline is for getting the project completed. Say they have the best design, they have an amazing budget that affords us the ability to do everything that we want, but they want this job started within 2 months and completed within 6 months. I'm booking out generally a year at any given time, if not more. And I have little jobs and big jobs. So no, even if everything checks out, they have a design in place. This is the perfect customer. I'm not fit to turn a job around that quickly. For me to change my business model and put a team in place to turn this job around in that short amount of time, now I'm delivering a product that's not my product, that I don't, that's not how I work. That's not how I operate. So I'm changing my entire business to fulfill the needs of this customer. And now I'm delivering a product that's not my product. So this timeline for me is a huge indicator of whether this customer is my customer or not. Side benefit of telling people that you have a longer lead time is if somebody says, okay, that's fine, like we're willing to wait a year, then that more than likely is indicative of them wanting you to do the work. If they're willing to wait to get on your schedule, they're not willing to sacrifice what they want for a quicker turnaround. So they obviously want you to do the work. Another question that I ask people is if they've worked with a contractor before. I know just from experience that most of my customers are not first time renovators, remodelers. They've done work before. They've lived in homes where they've either had issues, had a bad experience with a contractor, or they just know what they want. Generally speaking, this is my customer. That's not to say that somebody, a first time home buyer, is not willing to pay for us to do the work. It just, more often than not, they're not hiring me. So while I may be throwing, out of 100 leads, maybe I'm throwing 5 out that potentially could have fit if we spent more time going into this process. But again, I have to play to my numbers here. I have to play to the percentages. And generally speaking, from past history, those have not been my customers. So I'm going to move ahead with the customers that I have a higher chance of landing that lead. So that's another discriminating factor for me that kind of rules people in or rules them out. This one can be somewhat contradictory for people. No, I'm sorry, not contradictory. When I think of the word, I'll let you guys know. Um, I I ask people for their address. And the reason that I do that is I typically look up their address, I see what their home is worth, and I see what type of lifestyle they can afford. If my kitchen started $100,000, $150,000, and somebody gets a hold of me and they live in a $200,000, $250,000 house, they may spend that on a kitchen, but more often than likely, they're not going to. And also, I don't know if I'm doing my job and being kind of a steward for this remodeling process and for these people's homes, if me selling them that type of job is the right thing to do, because they're not going to pull that money out. And if they're in that type of house, generally speaking, there's somebody who it it's important for them to invest intelligently and smartly, and to be able to not overinvest in that home. So I don't necessarily want to sell a job that's not valuable to a customer. So I know that with most of our customers, they have more of a disposable income, and there's things that they want, and the cost doesn't necessarily impact them as greatly. And I know that's my customer. So that is one of the reasons that I ask people for their address, and it really helps me screen a lot of customers. Um, I'll ask people where they heard of me, where the lead came from, how they heard about our company. And this is very telling for me. If it's Google, if it's online, it's great. I have great reviews out there, but there's no personal connection. And a lot of these leads fall flat on their face. They're just Googling contractors in my area. I know that that's not a highly qualified lead for me. So I generally don't waste that much time on them. If they came from social media, I have quite a few more leads that come across my plate on social, but when you look at the percentage of them, it's still relatively low. So the leads coming from social, while they're better, because they at least know what I stand for as a business, a lot of times they're still somewhat not as educated as other leads, and there's lacking that personal connection or experience. So they're still lower on my list. If they come from a designer or an architect, generally that's a pretty good lead, because they're invested in the process. They're looking for help. They understand the cost of doing it the right way and what this process looks like. They're more than likely not their first time around the block. And it generally ends up being a decent fit. You just have to still ask the right questions. And then a word of mouth referral is a very highly qualified lead, with the hopes that they've seen your work in person. They've spoken to the person who had an encounter with you, who you worked for, that engaged with you, and they understand how you run your business, what your price point is, and what can be of value to them with your services. So word of mouth referrals are great, probably the most well qualified leads. And again, it's the same thing, asking, like, have you walked the job? Have you talked to them? How much do they know about your services? You still have to do your homework. You still have to do your due diligence there. Lastly, I ask people if they're looking to bid out a project. And I kind of went into this a little bit earlier, but I just don't want to be competitively bidding jobs right now. I have enough customers who come to me who want us to do the work, so I'm going to focus my time on those people. I can only do, 4 to 6, for me, larger size projects a year, and then I fill in with my cabinet jobs and smaller projects and punch lists, little things for return customers. So if I have a very small amount of work that I can do in a year, I want to work for people who unwaveringly want my product and want me. So I don't want, if I'm bidding a project, then I'm not offering enough to this customer that they just want me. There's something else on the line and my product and the experience that you get with my company isn't enough to draw them to just us. Then I'm going to focus my effort on those people that are coming to me for me. I hope that this was a good introduction to my pre-construction process. It's getting to, why I've implemented the systems I do, why I feel the way that I do, why I have gotten away from competitively bidding, and, an introduction as to finding the right customer for me. Because my pre-construction process, it engages a customer, it asks for money, it requires a contract, an agreement. So I have to ensure that I'm getting in bed with the right customer, that this customer understands how we work, and that hopefully we're marrying this customer not only for the pre-construction but to do the job. So there's a lot that entails. There's a lot that goes into this. So I want to ensure that before I take that next step, I've done everything in my power to kind of rule out what makes a good customer for me and what makes a bad customer for me, and gives me the highest chances of being successful and enjoying myself on a job. Because I don't want, it could be the most pleasurable job in the world. If the customers are assholes, I'm not going to be happy. And on the other hand, like, the customers could be amazing, but it could just be work that doesn't light a fire under me. And I'm not going to be upset, and I'll be grateful that I'm there and that I have the work and for the kind customers, right? I would take this situation over the prior all day long, but I want to be challenged. I don't want to be kind of going through the motions. So I want to make sure that I have customers that really value what I do and want me to work for them and are good people, but also are want work done that challenges me and makes me kind of be the best version of myself. So next week, again, I'm going to get into the specifics of what my pre-construction contract and agreement looks like, but I want the big takeaway today to be how important it is to define who you are as a company, who you are as a business, what your strong points are, what your weaknesses are, and what type of customer does that lead to. Because every contractor out there has a customer. And the sooner you are able to find the right customer and work for the right customer, you will enjoy work more, you will be more profitable, and the jobs will keep rolling in. And I think that you will just have more success over the course of your career. And this goes for big or small companies. So as always, thank you guys for joining me today. Hopefully this was super helpful for you. I really enjoyed getting this blog post written. I think that there's a lot of good information for you. I think that there's going to be even more information next week that's really, really good for you, and there'll be more hard evidence to support this. But as always, if you enjoy this, if you can hop on and leave us a review, if you can spread the word, tell your friends, family, dogs, flag football coach, personal trainer, the trash man, whoever it may be, tell them about the Modern Craftsman podcast. Tell them about Midweek, and spread that word for us. And hop on, if you can, iTunes, give us a review. Let us know what you think. If you have any suggestions for us, any constructive criticism, if you want to see this go a different way, just reach out to me personally. My email is tyler@trghomeconcepts.com. And I hope to continue to provide you guys insight to my life, to my business, and kind of my experience. And I don't have all the answers. I can only share my perspective. But if this is helpful for you, then it's worth it. It's worth it for me to carve the time aside. So as always, thank you very much. I hope to see you guys next week on Midweek. Also, I remember that word that I was trying to think of. I said contradictory. It should be controversial. And that was with regard to asking somebody for their address. Again, that's not for me to pass judgment. We all come from somewhere, expensive is a very relative term to everyone. I completely understand that. All I'm looking to do is save myself time and save potential customers time. But that word is controversial, not contradictory. So excuse me.